Michelle, we know that diversity in trials is an issue today and something that regulators are looking at closely now as well. Andrea asks, how can a decentralized model enable greater patient diversity in trials, and why is that so critical today?
Sure. I mean, when you look at the profile of participants, we really lack diversity, and that is something that needs to be addressed, and I think decentralized trials are an important part of that and not the only part of that. But, when it comes to decentralized clinical trials, what excites me about the impact for diversity is really a matter of access, right? So, as a physician scientist at Stanford, I led rare disease research in an autoimmune disease, and I was really recruiting patients all over the world. And, there was a very small number of patients who lived in the Stanford and surrounding area versus when you look at that entire world of participants. So, I think decentralized clinical trials really open the door to access. Now, with that said, I think there's a lot more work to be done, and it's about ensuring that patients, feel that we're partnering on these clinical trials and also adding value to tackle some of the hardest parts of living with a condition or a disease. And so, I think that in my kind of personal experience as a physician, a big part of that relationship is the trust. And I think we need to make sure that, we can bring clinical trials to everyone, and we still really focus on that important factor of trust, between patients and investigators. And I think if we can do those two things, we'll be able to move this forward and see more diversity. In our own work, when we look at access, and Medable benchmarks ourselves against this in as much as we can in every clinical trial, depending on, the internal data that we have, we do see a dramatic improvement in diversity in terms of age and gender when those aren't, related to inclusion criteria, as well as overall kind of background of participants. So I think, it's exciting, but there's still a lot more work to be done.
And Jeff, I think Michelle made a couple of great points there, especially in regard to partnering. Decentralized trials, I think, are a great opportunity to get more patients involved in trials and a more diverse patient population as well. But I think there's also some caution we have to take there. I think homeschooling this year has shown that a lot of households don't have access to the same tools, technologies, connections, and so forth that others do. And I think as we move forward with these centralized trials, we may want to make sure that we're not further leaving certain groups behind.
Yeah, I think Michelle raised several good points. I think we need to step back for a minute and say, okay, well, decentralized trials are going to be a step in the right direction. I think we have to make sure we're addressing the root cause of the problem and not the symptoms. And I think the root cause of lack of diversity in clinical trials is the inequality of healthcare in our country. So if, your physician is the ER doc, then the likelihood that you're going to participate in the clinical trial, that you're going to have the opportunity to engage in a discussion with a physician about clinical trial is really low. So I think we really need to do something about healthcare. And I think the spotlight has really been even brightened on this. And I think that is a good thing, as it's something that we've been trying to address for years, and we need to sort of double down on that effort. I was really heartened by the government stepping into the Moderna vaccine trial and saying, you're going to hit your enrollment number, but you're not going to have sufficient diversity representation. And as a consequence, they slowed the completion of the enrollment in that trial, and they left it open only to enrollment to minorities. And as a consequence, they got very good data, which was more representative of the population at large, rather than a skewed population.
Tammy asks, and Debbie, I'll address this one to you since you're on the pharma side of the house. She asks about preparation for on-site FDA inspections during COVID. I think we're all hopeful that in the next few months, maybe that we can start moving away from this COVID environment. But did you have any experience with that in the past year, or have you heard anything about the preparations you can make for that?
We are doing that now because we know that some of our trials will go on another year, another 2 years, and we're going to look back and we'll remember the pain of COVID, but maybe not every single detail of the decision making that we made. So we are actually storyboarding now all of our trials, whether it be a phase 2 trial, a phase 1 trial, a phase 3 trial, et cetera, in terms of when did COVID hit? When did we send out communications to site? Maybe we stopped enrollment. Maybe we started enrollment. When did we make decisions about, sending an amendment to the agency, et cetera? We've storyboarded all of that from an electronic perspective so that we have a record. And I would encourage everyone who's working in pharma to do the same, because we think we will remember all of this, even whether we're running 1 or 2 trials or running a couple hundred trials. We're not going to remember all of what we did and why we did it. So storyboarding is something we should be doing now. And hopefully I think that will help us in terms of the messaging and the communication and remembering what we did and why we did it.